A very good evening. You're watching the press preview. It's our chance to check out Sunday's front pages for the first time. And tonight we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Rachel Shabby and deputy political editor at the Daily Mail, John Stevens. Good evening to you too. We'll speak to you in a moment. We'll check out the front pages first though, beginning with The Observer, which says Northern Ireland has slipped into a political crisis after Sinn Féin's triumph in the Assembly election, with the DUP vowing to block the formation of a new power-sharing executive at Stormont. The Sunday Telegraph leads with Housing Secretary Michael Gove claiming voters turned against the Conservatives in the local elections because of the housing crisis. In a change to royal protocol, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are set to be addressed by their first names while on duty and not their title. That's according to the Sunday Mirror. Just William, the headline. And the Sunday People reports Ukrainian hackers have attempted to halt Putin's victory party vodka. And don't forget that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch and listen to us talking about them. And I'm joined tonight by Rachel Shabby and John Stevens. Great to see you. So let's crack on. Lots to talk about. It's been a very busy 48 hours or so. Rachel, let's start with you in the front of The Observer and this huge news this evening. Seismic, as The Observer says. Sinn Féin now the largest party in Stormont and victory fuelling debate on the future of the union, as The Observer says. What do you make of it?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a massive story. It is a seismic shift for Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin secured 29% of the first preference vote. It's now got the majority of seats in the Northern Ireland and gets to nominate the First Minister, which is a huge, huge change for a political system in Northern Ireland that is designed to keep returning unionist parties. But it does seem like, I think Sky News was crunching the numbers earlier today, which was super interesting, because it looks as though in terms of vote share, Sinn Féin hasn't actually gone up. It's just that the unionist parties, and in particular the DUP, has been punished, and non-allied parties have increased their share. And so this punishment of the DUP presumably is the result of it backing, first of all, Brexit, which the majority of Northern Ireland rejected, but secondly, the protocol, hugely unpopular protocol, which essentially puts border checks between Northern Ireland and Britain, and therefore for unionist voters looks like driving a wedge between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. So it does look like the DUP took a hammering in this election. But as you say, it is huge news for Northern Ireland, the first time this has happened. And its consequences could be just as big.
Yeah, and you're right when you say about the vote share. It's absolutely split between the Nationalists and the Unionists, both on 40%. John, we now have this situation, don't we, where two of the UK devolved nations are led by parties who want to leave it.
Yeah, so I think you've got the government who've got a double nightmare on this one. Firstly, you've got the problems of the protocol that were there before, and the DUP is saying it won't go back into a power-sharing agreement unless the protocol's been sorted out. And now, alongside that, you've got the problem of Sinn Féin coming top and suggestions that this could eventually lead to a referendum on unification in Ireland. I mean, I would say two things on that. You know, Sinn Féin hasn't actually gained any seats on this election. It's the same number of seats as last time. It's that they've done better than the DUP because the DUP have had its vote split. Some of it's gone to the TUV, which is more hardline on the protocol, and some of it has gone to Alliance, which is the cross-community party. But, you know, and also a referendum isn't something that's going to be automatically going to happen. You know, under the Good Friday Agreement, for a referendum to take place, there has to be an indication that there would be support for that. And I'm not sure there is that at the moment. But I think people in Britain will be concerned about this and thinking what is going to happen in the future. On the front page of The Observer, they've got a quote from Mary Lou McDonald, who is the president of Sinn Féin, She leads the party south of the border. And she says that unionists, don't be scared, is her message. The future is bright for us all. I think that her saying don't be scared isn't going to stop them being scared. I think there will be concerns in London that this will possibly lead to a referendum that could see the UK broken up.
Yeah, it's the same photograph, exactly the same photograph, actually on the front of the Sunday Telegraph as well, of Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou McDonald. We could talk a lot more on this, but we've got so much to get through. And I want to talk about the elections in England as well. The front of the Sunday Telegraph, Rachel, housing crisis cost us votes, says Gove. The dust has obviously settled now a little bit. And for the Tories, this was worse than just the midterm blues.
Yeah, I mean, the Conservatives really took a hammering in these local elections. I'm not sure if it was about housing, although I can understand that the housing minister would want to make that the case. But for what people were reporting around that election and what people were saying who were canvassed, it does seem that Partygate was a big, big deal, particularly in those seats in the south, the council seats in the south, where the Lib Dems swept up quite considerably in those areas. Housing is an issue for sure, and there's a stat in this piece that is really glaring. It says that in 24 to 30-something-year-olds, so young people completely locked out of the housing market, the number of homeowners in that group has halved since the 80s. And so it's just impossible for young people to attain the same standard of living in any sense economically as their parents, which is awful for a generation to go backwards. But I think that's just one piece of an economic picture that is grim, that is, earning a wage is no longer enough to guarantee freedom from anxiety over how to put food on the table, how to pay essential bills. And that's the fundamental problem, that you can have a job and still be in poverty. That's systemic. Yeah. And that's something that honestly neither of the major parties has got a solution to right now.
Yeah. John, just very briefly, give me your assessment of how things went for the Tories and Labour, and then let's move on to the Starmer dinner party, also on the front of the Telegraph.
Well, the results were clearly disappointing for the Tories. There are lots of places around the country where they've lost seats. I think the one good thing that they have found is that on the other side, Labour's support hasn't been growing equally around the country. So they did quite well in Scotland, they did quite well in Wales, and they obviously did well in London. But if you look at the rest of England, they didn't actually put on that many council seats. I think that's why the Tories aren't quite so angry about the results as they could have been.
And just staying with you, John, Starmer dinner was planned. There's this new memo, isn't there, which is bringing various things into question yet again for the Labour leader.
Yeah, this is a memo that's popped up in the Mail on Sunday. That this row just keeps rumbling on and keeps creating problems for Keir Starmer. And what this memo suggests, it's actually a plan of the day and agenda for Keir Starmer for this day in question, which was April last year. And one of the things that Keir Starmer said in the last few weeks is that they just took a break from doing bits of work to have this curry and have this beer where he was pictured, and then they went back to work. And what this agenda for the day shows is that the curry that he had was actually marked down in the diary for the very end of the day. And then after that, it just says end of visit. And I think this creates a new problem for Keir Starmer. He's not also got the police investigating this now, but it's also questions about, has he actually been honest with the public about this? And when you speak to Tory MPs who complain about how Partygate came up in the doors during the local elections, what they were saying is that voters were more angry about that they felt that Boris Johnson hadn't told the truth about the parties rather than the actual parties in the first place. And I think there's a danger here that voters will be cross with Keir Starmer if they don't think that he's told the truth. And then added to that, the hypocrisy of complaining about Tories having parties if he is fined and found to have breached the rules. And I think that will be a toxic combination of both dishonesty and hypocrisy.
Yeah, Rachel, you're nodding your head, and you brought up Partygate as well as being a big issue for voters. I mean, Sir Keir's sort of backed himself into a bit of a corner here, hasn't he? Because he should never have said the Prime Minister should resign because there's a police investigation, because now he's in the position where there's a police investigation and people are saying, well, mate, you need to go.
Yeah, I mean, it was strategically not the smartest thing to do. But I think that appraisal is right in the sense that we're talking about not so much annoyance with what actually happened, but annoyance at the lying, at the dishonesty and the hypocrisy. And I think that's the trouble for Keir Starmer now, that it does look profoundly hypocritical to have really gone for Boris Johnson and then Rishi Sunak over Partygate, and then be found, being investigated along similar lines. Now, my worry, and actually you could see that reflected in the fact that, over the local elections, Labour didn't actually make that many gains. Parties that gained were the Lib Dems, the Greens. Independent candidates did very well. Labour, not so much. Now, my concern is not particularly with Keir Starmer or with Boris Johnson. My concern is that people are just going to look at this lot and think, what even is the point? They all lie, they're all dishonest, they're all hypocritical.
Is that why the Lib Dems did so well then? Do you think that's why the Lib Dems did so well?
Sorry?
I was saying, do you think that's part of the reason why the Lib Dems did so well? Because it was almost, I don't want to vote for either of them, so I'll vote for you.
I think that's why the Lib Dems, the Greens and independent candidates did so well, yeah.
Yeah, OK. Let's move on because we're running out of time. Just want to move to the Sunday Express. John, ever optimistic. PM promises Brexit bills bonanza, exclamation mark.
Yes, this is the Queen's speech, which is going to be taking place on Tuesday, when the government will set out its legislative agenda, if I can speak, which will be its list of bills that it's planning to bring forward in the next year or so. And the Sunday Express is reporting, describes there's going to be a super 7 of Brexit freedom bills. It says that there'll be 7 bits of legislation in there which are linked to Brexit, using the kind of freedoms that we've got since we left the EU to do things. Although I've not quite read the full article, so I'm not sure what exactly they are saying is going to be in this legislation.
Quick word on this, Rachel, before we move on.
I'm just glad that I didn't have to say that tongue twister, but I do think this is really scraping the barrel. There is no bonanza, and actually, in legislative terms, the Conservatives are looking pretty thin all round. OK,
and just staying with you, Rachel, front page of the Sunday Mirror. Now, this is an interesting one, isn't it? This is an exclusive by Sarah Robertson. I love the headline, Just William. It appears that Prince William and Kate are set to be addressed by name and not title in a huge shake-up of royal protocols. So instead of addressing them as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, they'll be simply William and Kate. Rachel.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a great headline as well. Absolutely. They're dropping formalities. They want to be referred to by first names. They're dropping formalities like curtsies and bows and all the rest of it. This is following their not so great tour of the Caribbean. But I suspect that the problem with I'm not a royalist, so I suspect the problem with the royal family isn't the formalities, it's the concept itself that people are rejecting.
OK. And John, what do you think of this? I mean, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to see whether we call Kate Kate or Catherine, because William always calls her Catherine, doesn't he, where the rest of the country seems to go with Kate.
Yeah, I think if you strip away all the kind of formalities and the titles and the curtsies and the bows, then I think people will question what exactly do you have left. I think obviously if William and Kate or the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are talking to children in a hospital on a visit, you can imagine them wanting to be called William and Kate. But I think for normal engagements, I think it's quite normal that you call them the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And I think that's all part of the royal family.